Hi, I'm Ralph Kilman, co-author of the Thomas-Kilmann Conflict Mode Instrument. 50 years ago, I could not have imagined that I would be making a video for the 2024 celebration of the TKI's 50th year. My goodness, it has been a long time. In this video, I will be responding to a number of questions that pertain to where the TKI came from, what we've experienced, and what to expect in the next 50 years. How did I get introduced to conflict? Where did that all begin, that interest in my life? In reflecting on that question, I've realized that it's my parental heritage. My parents came from Nazi Germany and escaped there in 1936. My mother was Jewish, my father Protestant. That religious conflict did not go well in Germany, and they were forced to leave. Otherwise, they would have probably lost their lives. That stayed with me through all the family stories I heard throughout my childhood about that mega conflict that led to World War II. So that was always in the background. Then I went to college, Carnegie Mellon University, and there I met a couple of professors who were interested in conflict. One was Lou Pondy, who wrote a number of articles in the 1960s on conflict, and also Herb Simon, who wrote some material on group conflict, and later, I should add, won a Nobel Prize. So I was in good company. Well, anyway, this background in conflict, both from my parents and then what I was exposed to at Carnegie Mellon University, sowed the seeds for what would come later. And then I entered UCLA's doctoral program in 1970. And that's where I met Ken Thomas. And I learned that Ken was working on his dissertation on interdepartmental conflict and how to use the 5 modes for addressing interdepartmental conflict. Meanwhile, from my background at Carnegie Mellon, I had been interested in research methodology, particularly instrument development. In fact, while I was at Carnegie, I worked on developing projective tests, which are harder to develop and validate because they're so elusive. But basically, you have to learn what does it mean to measure something accurately when you get people to respond to any kind of instrument, whether it's projective, self-report, whatever. Well, Ken and I developed a very nice friendship very early on. We're only 4 years difference in age, and basically we just had a lot of interest. Even if we hadn't developed the TKI, I believe Ken and I would have been friends for life anyway. But because of his interest in conflict, which raised all the previous interests and background I had in conflict, and my interest in research methodology, at some point Ken and I must have said to each other, hey, why don't we develop an instrument that accurately measures the different conflict modes? I don't remember exactly when that happened or what the words were, but it must have happened, and the rest is history, so to speak. And then as a result of our joint interest in conflict and instrument development, that's where the TKI began. The reason I believe that the TKI has endured so well during the past 50 years are twofold. One is the topic of conflict itself. That has escalated in interest and experience. In the early 70s, when Ken and I developed the TKI, there wasn't a lot of discussion about conflict and conflict management. It was a little bit discussed in the sociological literature, in the psychological literature, in political science, but it really wasn't yet mainstream. That all changed with globalization, diversity in the workplace, polarization, and the internet, and how people are all connected worldwide, and that exposes all the incompatibilities and all the differences and all the tensions, and therefore we have conflict. The second reason I believe the TKI has endured so well in the past 50 years is it accurately measures the 5 conflict modes. If you recall, I spent a lot of time on instrument development. Ken and I realized that the prior instruments on conflict management were not accurate. In fact, on the earlier instruments, people came out high in collaborating and low on avoiding. That was for social desirability reasons, to look good to themselves and other people. Ken and I developed the TKI to basically compensate and make sure that people accurately reflect their behavior when they respond to the 30 A-B choices on the instrument. In fact, some people said it's a little difficult taking the TKI, even though it only takes 15 minutes. Why is it difficult? Because you have to give honest responses. Because your choices between the A and B on each of the 30 items is based on equal social desirability. So if a mode for collaborating and a mode for avoiding are compared and you have to choose one or the other, both of them are already equal in social desirability, so presumably you have to now choose based on your own behavior. Some people find that a little troublesome. So essentially, because conflict has escalated throughout the world, and because the TKI did take into account social desirability, so it gets a more accurate measure of people's actual conflict handling behavior, I think that's why the instrument has so endured. I remember one time I was on vacation and I was in a nice resort, and to get from my room to the hotel lobby, I had to walk through the conference center. So there I'm walking through the conference center. A number of the ballroom doors are open, so I can a little bit hear what's going on. And as I walked by one door, I heard the term TKI. Obviously, that caught my attention. So I eased my way into the room. The door was open, and I stood in the back where other people were standing. There was standing room only, and a trainer or consultant was presenting the results of the TKI assessment to the audience. And after she went over the results, she asked for questions. And I didn't know what to do, but I said, why not? So I raised my hand and I asked the question, and she responded, and I was done. And when she was done, I said, oh, by the way, just so you know, I'm Ralph Kilmann, the co-author of this assessment tool. There was shock. There was quiet. You could hear a pin drop. It was like bizarre. And I had to say again, yes, I'm actually the Ralph Kilmann who developed the instrument. I'm staying in this hotel, and I was walking by, and I couldn't help but come in when I heard the term TKI. Thank you so much. This is an enjoyable experience. It has added tremendously to my vacation. I am one who certainly sees conflict in virtually every situation. I'm just attuned to that. That's what happens when you develop a conflict mode instrument. In terms of the trends, I certainly see conflict seeping into every aspect of society, from families all the way to nations, and everything in between. So this becomes vital for people to learn a skill to recognize conflict, not shy away from it, see the possibilities of managing it, and therefore being able to satisfy their most important needs and concerns in every situation, as best as is possible. That's the skill of conflict management, and it's going to be needed more and more as time goes by. As I now look back over the past 50 years of the TKI assessment, I guess the one thing that stands out, it perhaps seems so simple, but that it's endured. That's been the biggest surprise. I mean, Ken and I, back in the early 1970s, these young, aspiring researchers, assistant professors, doctoral students, we were so young and we were so optimistic that our instrument could make a difference. But if you asked us, do we really think 50 years later it would still be growing, it would still be around, it would still being used in new and exciting ways? I don't think we could have expected that. This is like a big surprise that what we created has actually spread so much across the planet. In fact, it's been said that if you hid the TKI under a rock, people would find it. It's out there and people are using it. So I'm thrilled. It's such an honor to be participating in this celebration of the TKI's 50th year. And I wish you all the best. And thank you for everything you've done to bring the TKI along and make a difference in your life with respect to conflict management.